up, Schmoedown fans and random rockers? T the Man here. This is Schmoedown Rocks, and the last for the year of 2018. Hopefully you can see me. It's a little dark. Forgive me and excuse me for the lighting, but yeah. This is going to be a long one, so because it was a very, very, very long Schmoedown. And yeah. Also, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year's. Enjoy the shirt. Enjoy the shirt. Anyway. Yeah, guys. Schmoedown spectacular, ladies and gentlemen. I think I got some chocolate on my cord. Anyway. So, the Schmoedown Spectacular 3, ladies and gentlemen, is pretty awesome. We have 6 matches. About 3 to 4 of them are title matches. 1 number 1 contender, 1 for commissioner. 1 this time a commissioner bowl as opposed to manager bowl from last year's Spectacular 2. And this year, at least as far as our main event, which is usually the singles title, they finally did something right with it. And with that, in that we got a solid match, but it's not exactly, their bet. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's their best match. It was the best match of the entire thing, unfortunately. Especially when the beginning, the part 1, if I had to rank each video, unfortunately, like from highest to lowest, part 1, part 3, 1 at number 1, part 3 at number 2, and part 2 at number 3. I have nothing to end, but I'll have to go in order. And part 1, Commissioner Bowl was great. We had for the most part, the main story thread line that was throughout this entire thing is Fidstock lost his mask. Old Tom Dagnito. And eventually we do at the end find out what happened with that, and that leads to a potential storyline thread for the future going into season 6, 7? I want to say 6. Because this season, this year in general, has probably been so far kind of the best in Schmoedown for the most part, even though the way things ended, especially now finally having gotten into Action Arby, I was sad. We'll get to that. And it's even sadder when you kind of tease us something that we've kind of wanted that would have been awesome, and then you kind of threw us for a loop. It's almost like a thing with Schmoedown now, ever since Spectacular 2, but with that thing. But now with the Commissioner Bowl, a lot of things Dagnito said throughout this entire thing were hilarious. It was just hilarious in of itself, especially coming in with the laser beams, with the no shoots water guns, we shoot laser beams. It's like, which was ridiculous. And it seems the way they're setting things up, and in fact, before we get to that match, which is the best match as far as I'm concerned of the entire thing, and a lot of people will agree on that, especially building up from Anarchy. But before that, Commissioner Bowl was a huge storyline thread with dealing with Thad's commissionership since Spectacular 2, how that whole thing came to a head with that, and everyone wanted pretty well Christian to win the whole thing anyway, get his commissionership back. But they had a backup plans thread storyline that wouldn't have mattered and given us a proper resolve regardless. And that's kind of, I think, the part of the Commissioner Bowl. Even though the thing that made the Commissioner Bowl even more interesting was the fact the match actually was, even compared to the Manager Bowl, was actually surprisingly better. And any Manager Bowl or Commissioner Bowl that will follow is going to have to live up to the heights this one reached, which gave us basically a sudden death. Luckily, the sudden death being the three that honestly mattered in this match. Finstock just, it was more his own mouth, and it got to the point where eventually it got annoying, but some of the things he said were funny. The match up with that matchup, Christian coming out, Dad's coming out, getting booed, even beginning trying to open up the thing. We had a national anthem again like last year, though as much as Miss Movies Brienne Chandler herself can sing good, has a good alto, she can't reach that range Sinead did and last season, so she did good, but it's just not the same. I was kind of more complaining about where's Sinead when it came to that, and she's a good singer, so don't come at me, Miss Movie fans. I like her too. I want to see Take the Cannoli come back, which it seems they're continually been hinting at ever since they wound up losing in the second round of Anarchy, but can't wait for that. Which is why I don't know why certain people in their recent Facebook posts up to this point of me taping this have suggested something about McWinnie being heel. I mean, a tweener, sure, which Brienne seems to kind of go that way, but still more in the face than the heel direction regardless, so it just works better this way. And their entrances were fine. I think there was a Harry Potter-ish entrance with Emma 5, which was a fine one, but I liked another one beforehand, and I kind of posted it on the Facebook page and put myself out there, even though I've kind of hinted at it. I may as well say I have a thing with that. I don't know, it's just nerdy girls who like their Star Wars, but more specifically have the thing for anime that's very hard to come by, or at least look as good as Emma. But anyway, and to the extent of having pulled off almost every possible hairstyle you could think of, while wearing and not wearing glasses. I mean, I'm just saying. And I am Five Club too, but even though I wound up Action Army first, but I had a thing for Fight before Action Army, but just whatever. Though speaking of which, she won this whole thing, which some people were not initially happy with at first, but given the way the storyline went, they probably stopped bitching, because technically, as I think I and most people were starting to predict, even I mentioned it somewhere in the chats, I kind of figured Christian would, though I didn't expect some of the things to be said, having to be said. Though that should have seen the chairman thing coming, but I didn't. I will say that. I really did enjoy the Harloff's little reveal, and mostly his jabs at Thad. Him going around the table. Don't know exactly what he was trying to do when it came to Dagnino. It just maybe gave him a stern look. Did what I wish I could have done and gotten away with. with number 5, I tell you what. I'd kiss her hand. You already know that. But anyway. If she let me, but Anyway. Hashtag please don't say creepy. Yeah. I'd say that was funny, and more so his thing with that, more him coming out with the LaCroix, everyone who's seen Collider live. Nice little jabs, including the chalice. Just then him doing his classic Arnold impression. I do one. Even better, using it against Thad. Thad, who mocked his impression and been like, fuck you. It was great. I ain't even trying with the impression, so don't even at me on that. And then him come to in chipmunk-esque voices, or as he would call them, shit rat voices. Also shoot squirrels, so he has a thing against squirrels and chipmunks. He'd probably be a good, if we gave him a gun, he'd probably and gave him a hunting license, he'd have fun. I'm damn sure. Even though I'm not a squirrel hunter, I'm more of a big game deer hunter specifically. I could show you proof of that, but anyway. The whole thing with that matchup was great. The whole thing was great. The back and forths, more so, especially when Christian came up and unfortunately got spinners. You got no opponent's choice on the wheel. It's to the wheel, and then the slight comment of "you dead to me, Emma" was kind of was kind of funny for a brief period. And I love how they all chose to give it to Dagnino, and it was Thad who had to say it first. Well, he's a loser, so we give him movie taglines. Which he started off pretty well. Of course, if you're going to give him one that's what he knows is related to Arnie or Sly, he's gonna, especially that True Lies one. He was gonna, but yeah, and then I think, especially speaking of Arnie and Sly, the whole thing that just weirdly, just oddly enough, that kind of says it's unscripted, but it was kind of just so funny how that it turned out to where, Emma and them were still ahead, but yet they couldn't reach them. When it came down to it, Christian did what he needed to do to at least catch up and tie with Emma and them, but or at least enough to where he wouldn't, get kicked out immediately first, which was good, and it just happened to be lucky that all of the categories, when it came to the first two questions in the third round, the 5-pointers and stuff, the 2 and the 3-pointers, none of them could get, and they were ironically ones that the two of them could have, if they would have just switched up, Christian would have been out of it, for sure. And Christian got lucky and enough to where he could get his 5-pointer in, but not successfully get it, and no one ever did. Didn't help when the last question Emma was going to get would have been Sly and Arnie. Harloff's was great. Reaction was great. And that matchup was... But that wasn't even the best match. The reveal of what was basically the missing page that was actually supposed to be the 4 months, even though he said 4 months, even though they had said 6 months earlier. So that's a little bit of a mess up, but it drove the point home. We got it. I really did, and his reveal that he's basically decided, no, I'm not commissioner, I'm the damn chairman, as we all knew he probably would be, and I'm now made that official, and that Emma's eventual win off of basically the burlesque question in sudden death, which is what it went to, which no one expected this to be as good a match as it was, yet alone having a proper conclusion to that whole storyline the way they did. And then, of course, in the process of all this, also proving that he was a mastermind, the man behind the man behind the man, that led to the corruption thing that gave us basically the best things, or at least made the two leagues somehow outshine the singles, which is why it hurts a lot for what Christian would announce later, even though it doesn't hurt me as much as given that I am a dollar patron as of the past few months, but we'll get to that later. And that is the fact of, and all that, and Christian's eventual thing. And then, of course, we finally got the tag team title match. That is the best match here. Who's the boss? The winner of the Team Anarchy Team Tournament, facing off against, which I'm glad the whole triple threat thing didn't pan out in the storyline mode, which would have been interesting to see, but I'm glad they didn't do that, and it was better off they did it the way that they did it, between Who's the Boss and even though, let's face it, those two teams that pretty well were the semifinal and that half of the bracket were, aside from maybe Founding Fathers, aside from maybe Founding Fathers or Cinemaniacs, and basically anyone that actually thought Who's the Boss is probably maybe would have been worth coming back to, but we kind of figured Cinemaniacs wouldn't have held up as well. Though the fact that Emma, after this, and the apparent Shirewolf win, and yes, which sucks because I wanted Who's the Boss to win. Don't get me wrong, but at least the way this match went and ended, I have actually at least been somewhat satisfied. I'm more satisfied with the way the Shirewolves had chose to end, because at least Who's the Boss didn't go down without a fight, and in turn it had a more of a Rocky feel to it. Literally the first Rocky Apollo fight in Rocky 1. That's how awesome this was because, or at least the way this ended it, especially, which went to literally the last 5-point question, which was Shirewolf's last 5-point question. Just the thing, they lucked out enough to where they at least were able to get all their they had to get all their points, and they were able to get all 3 questions in their 5th round. It wasn't so much the 3rd round as it was more what happened to Riley and Ben in the buzzer round on the first question, which they knew they had it, but they didn't say it right enough to where they wound up losing a point, unfortunately. And if they had at least had that point, they might have had a little bit more of an advantage going into the next round, hopefully, if things still panned out with the numbers that they chose for the questions. Mouthful. Anyway, I really did. I dug that. The Commissioner Bowl was and then of course, yeah, Emma after that, and the way they even ended it with Dagnino giving the handshake was amazing. Shake to Emma was nice. Yeah, and I did, like I said, I did like the outfit. I'm guessing it's a race. I'm guessing she went off a risky business. I'm guessing. If so, she may as well have just topped, to me personally, just topped the Heidi Klum one. Period. So, oh man. Hold on. I'm going to move this over a little bit. Maybe that wasn't a good idea, but alright. Anyway, I really did enjoy the whole thing with how this entire match was great. And the big upset was that would have been a play of the whole thing was the straight run that no one saw coming was straight run of Festival Darlings, which not even William Bibiani in a past match or so was able to be successful at. Which I think that was during Bibb's lower, not so great days as a champ. No, before he was a champ and stuff like that, and had his lull run. Yeah, that was which for them, the fact that they had such easier questions, it seemed, compared to Bibbs, which was even more surprising because they weren't able to churn out those, and so they got lucky this time around. And that was amazing in that match as well. Of course, them having that 5th question action venture really helped them out enough to put it over the Shire Wolves and making them earn the belts and kind of showing off a very humble Matt. Very humbling and possibly turning face both Dagnino and even Ben Bateman to some extent, or at least slight face turn, not like half face turn, not full face turn, I would say. He still has a little bit of his, still has a little bit of that heel aggression shit in him, so he has a good balance to him, to where I think if he does go face, he'll be kind of in the same sense as how Roka's kind of is, which Roka, Nost, and pretty well almost all the other horsemen, which is ironic given Mark Riley. Those, by the way, Shire Wolves being Classy Clark Wolf, and Rachel the Crusher Cushing. It's a shame, and like Ben's taking the loss not so well, understandably. And then it seemed, I love the idea of having to see what we would have liked, and which would have been an Action Army faction, but it would have been kind of questionable for them to do it, and how Riley would have been able to leave the Horsemen anyway, or if it was one that would have resulted in possibly a possibility, but the way they were setting up, he was too heel, but to going to face, but not to the extent where he said Action Army for life as his way, and started calling Jessica Jen like she's supposed to be for once. So there was already hints of that, and yeah, it wasn't going over well with And yeah, Guy didn't take it too well and decided to pull what he did to Roka at last year's Spectacular, and the tackle that, in what is known as the tackle that broke the army. It was a rough few days, rough weekend. So rough that it did definitely play a part in kind of hurting part two, especially when part two tries to end on a somewhat funny note, but isn't really that funny and was kind of a pointless thing, or at least up until the promo starting off part three. Agree with that one, but the part one's promos, I mean, there was a couple other promos, but not really worth talking about. I mean, one maniacal laugh thing that was kind of funny with Finstock's part with his mask thing, and was funny. A lot of the moments he had with Riley, and Riley just kind of just like, stop it with your freaking mask. And him just, whatever. Especially when it came to the Horseman thing in the as the promo prior to the number one contender match. But yeah. Oh yeah, let's do the Army salute to the fall of the army of the action. Has mouth sound effects, had to do that. But anyway, the whole thing with her, there's not much to talk about. Ken tried, Knapsack tried, but we all knew Alex Damon. He was humbled. A little bit of an extra little loss for corruption. Not something they needed. Obviously, Kalinowski, especially going into Intergeekdom, was a little perturbed, and with Christian, even more funny given that the two of them had actually, done commentary together. Though I still want to see him and Knapsack do commentary together. Knapsack's starting to go back a little more. I figured he was kind of going back face, or he's reached that good tweener moment, which I feel like Corruption is at least kind of now went tweener in their moments, because especially when we get to part 3, I'm talking about that. But I did love, but I figured Alex Damon was going to win anyway, and they did. The only thing that made that definitely worthwhile, as most people will tell you, and other reactors will tell you, that it was pretty much the whole idea of possibly celebration, of Star Wars Celebration, which is going to be in Chicago, and probably be the one reason why I would want to go to Chicago, is to see that Schmoedown match, epic Schmoedown match between Sam Witwer and Alex Damon for that Star Wars title, which I think that match will actually reinvigorate the Star Wars going into 2019. That's for darn sure. I'm really... the Clark, I figured after having such a match as she did, I figured she was going to be spent, but luckily not to the extent that that would make this match. The thing is, these matchups, though, in terms of compared to Spectacular 2, the Star Wars match was the highlight of that year. This one I wasn't expecting it to, but given Collider Collision earlier this year, and that matchup, which was meh, I wish Scrimshaw would have, fought for it, and it might have been a better matchup than whoever they chose. It was kind of felt last minute, and it felt forced, and it just didn't pan out as well, and we all figured Damon would win that one. This one we kind of did, but at least we knew Ken would put up more of a fight, and he did, and was a better opponent. But like I said, it was, at least in comparison to the Collision match, that was a better match, and compared to the first matchup between Dan Murrell and Clark Wolf, this was a better match. And even though Clark Wolf pretty well lost to Dan Murrell, even though Clark Wolf is hungrier for it, she was just too exhausted to be able to allow her. She was hungry enough to where she put up more of a fight, especially coming off of a nice win, but she was already spent from the match she already had, which was kind of a thing even when it came to Sam Levine. Though Sam Levine got lucky that he was able to get the single, that Christian was more exhausted when it came to that singles title match, especially after his loss for the team titles, which we were more interested in by that point. But it all worked itself out, and eventually Sam Levine would have both belts, and eventually after Collision, I think or after the title week, he eventually decided to, give away the belts, which left us with what would wind up becoming eventually of things like Anarchy and what happened and everything else that happened at Collision. But anyway, as far as I am concerned, which is why we had only had the tag team title match and no single belt. But that was fine because the tag team and Intergeekdom were the much bigger deals as far as I'm concerned. And I enjoyed what we got. And I enjoyed what we had. Those matches were better than the matches that had preluded those prior, those in terms of Star Wars Championship and in terms of the first Clark versus Merle, first Wolf versus Merle match. So that's at least was good enough, but just as far as what we got out of part 1 and how awesome that wound up turning out, it just made part 2 seem lesser, and part 3, if anything, needed to step it up above part 2, but even if they couldn't step it up above part 1, given that these are more main event tier matchups, given everything, and it's clear that the tag team match should have been instead of the Intergeekdom, but I understood the Intergeekdom where that was at, and it worked out. And we actually got a match that was probably even better than the finals match we did get between Kalinowski and Konopik, which I was more Konopik. Even though I have an issue because I'm fan of both Corruption fan page, but I'm a founding member on the Konopik fan page. But that's kind of because of the Action Army thing, in a weird way, because it was a photo of a guy, and it gave me a founding member badge, which I wear proudly. Even more so because I hated what happened after what was said in the post interview. Though I feel like they edited it later, I guess, better, or at least it came across better. As I think most people lost their mind when she kind of made it seem like everything that was happening was nothing, and that kind of hurt. She was just, or at least seemed nothing because in comparison to what her health was, and that was, once you see it more that way, you'll understand. And I'm very disappointed in all the people at the More Economic fan page for acting the way they did, and I'm hoping those people who did got booted off or got put in their place, as they should be, because that is bullshit, and I will not stand for it as a founding member of that. I will wear that badge proud. So, and which in turn made Kalinowski's look really good. Promo and his thank you to Corruption seem really good. Made him look like made his ordeal become more like a face turn, especially given the way things built up after the Commissioner Bowl earlier in part 1. Seemed better. And that's the thing. And I loved it. Went to sudden death to 3 questions, but once it got to Revenge of the Sith, I kind of had a feeling Mara was not going to do well, especially given that she missed a 5-pointer, which would have won her the match if she had known. It seems Revenge of the Sith, or I think she knows Star Wars. I just think it's more specifically Revenge of the Sith that was an issue, which I don't blame her. It was a prequel, so even though there's some prequelists that would have. Like Ken, that probably would have got that question and might have won a match in the process of it. Or at least, it's just a shame with that one Ken didn't. But anyway, I love that matchup. And even through the promo, it kind of made me more. It worked to having to be now a little bit more sympathetic towards Kalinowski, I guess, especially given that in a previous promo in past weeks, he was kind of starting to doubt himself, and it took Ken to build him up. So you could kind of see he was kind of getting his head straight about it, and I'm glad and I'm kind of glad that he won, because now it meant it wasn't all for naught. And then of course now we have the singles belt, which was with a big match, and of course Merle having won the number 1 contendership going into New York, who was he going to face? And that's what this championship match was all about. And this is the first time for Roca that he's actually finally headlining as a champion. And it's unfortunate that he didn't get the chance to do what we were all hoping he would do, and that was retain, which he didn't. And my God, I'm kind of fine with it because of the fact that Ethan Irwin through this, he's proven himself both player and now Rookie of the Year, especially after what happened with Mara's promo. That really screwed her out of that, if anything. Oof, that was rough. But she does still get a nom, okay, but I could see it not happening because of that promo. But I'm hoping things have cooled off now since then. But now, overall, I did that matchup. Was fun. It had funnier moments, mostly the Denzel Washington part, mostly with Ethan's part on round 2 with the Denzel Washington thing. More marks to work of trying to get Denzel Washington's number, and Ethan going, even almost giving it up, but wait a minute, and then Roga's comments of, and then for the steal, and Mark's like, and Mark and Roka's like, I'll steal that, and his promo, by the way, was pretty good, and it's unfortunate what happened after this match, especially after the loss he had, and then having to lose Matt to the Horsemen, and that was sucked. Even though his leave was, the shuffle was funny. Especially when Mark was like, when it made Mark like, don't go. It's like, it was sad but funny at the same time. It was weird. And even funnier was the last question of round 4 in the buzzer round. They didn't bother to answer it because they were afraid to say it, and even though they thought it, and they should have went with it because it was Sam Levine was the answer, because it was who the character was in Glorious Masters. And like, was it Sam Levine, or am I confusing that with the Bear Jew or something? And I loved it. Sam's outburst, like, this is bullshit. I'm taking the damn time. Oh, it was just too. It was funny. Round 5, unfortunately, just didn't go Roka's way. Especially after the way the things turned out after round 2. It was going to be tough for him within round 3 and 4, and it just didn't pan out. It might have worked out better if he actually answered Sam Levine. If he actually bothered to try to do it, he might have had a better shot. Or may have at least went out. And it sucked. But yeah, Ethan, Jay Washington, congrats. Congrats on that win. So, but yeah, now it's Ethan Irwin versus Dynamite Spectacular whenever the live event, which is going to be live streamed. I don't know how that's going to go over. I'm not sure how people feel about with the Inner Geekdom and Team Leagues now being only on Patreon, which I think sucks, though I wonder if you can still watch it through YouTube unlisted. Eventually Christian's going to work the kinks out when it comes to that, because he knows his reactors play a big part in building up the Schmoedown, and luckily for me, I will still be, regardless of if he sticks with it, what he has said, I will definitely be reacting to that. So you will see me, hopefully, in sometime in 2000, aside from, the Schmoedown Awards, trying to do his best to react 2000, and I'll probably have to plug the Patreon, 2019, so, yeah, I'm looking forward to this, and, to what's going on, especially with Machine versus Chance Ellison, but, yeah, that's about it, guys. I think that, hopefully, that was a good breakdown of, as short as I can, with what my thoughts and what I enjoyed, and highlights of what was the